Whoa! In today's video, my Shields of Avalon, my Arthurian-inspired Space Marine chapter, return as I create Lancelot. Let's go, Patsy. This video is sponsored by Hero Forge.
So if you're new to the channel or haven't seen before, my chapter, the Shields of Avalon, are a Space Marine chapter of Primaris Marines, descended from the Ultramarines, and themed around the Knights of the Round Table and King Arthur. Their homeworld is a knight world, and they have to balance the Codex Astartes with their hereditary Code Chivalric. The most honorable, noble sons of the households of their homeworld are destined to become Space Marines, while the noblest daughters are peerless knights in the Imperial Knight household. Each of the major positions in the Space Marine chapter are signified by an honorary title, a name taken on by the Space Marine when they are promoted to a particular position. And each of these positions are the Knights of the Round Table and various characters in Arthurian legends. Today, I'm making Lancelot, probably the most well-known and iconic knight, making him the obvious choice for my second company captain. Because of course, King Arthur leads the first as chapter master. So I'm going to start converting up Lancelot, making a diorama, and having a bunch of fun today. And while we do it, I'm going to tell you all about the Shields of Avalon, and maybe just a tiny bit about King Arthur and his knights. So when working out what parts I wanted to use for this conversion, my first port of call was, of course, the Space Marine Command set. There is an amazing captain at the front of this set, and I was very keen on using him. As soon as I opened the box, however, I did see we have previously used this on another project, and I can't for the life of me work out what that is. So bonus points in the comments if you can tell me what we use this captain for. With that thrown to the wind, we do thankfully have a Primaris Captain box. It's not the exact pose I was thinking, but I'm gonna grab it. Now, Lancelot is known for two primary weapons. He has lance in the name, so that's obvious, but he's mostly known for his peerless sword skills. So I'm planning on making a pose that's wielding a sword and also wielding a spear. Now, when I'm looking at arms holding spears, thankfully we have the fairly new Sanguinary Guard kit. And not only is there a nice spear in here, but there is also a really nice head. You see, when I think of the Knights of the Round Table, I want to go for some Space Marine heads that are a little bit more classically dashing or chivalrous, and the Blood Angels do offer us some nice head options for that. Now, to match this pose that we've got going on with the spear, I was thinking of using a sword, and there is a fantastic sword in the Asmodai kit that we have already kind of started pillaging for parts. So I think it's time to say Asmodai will never become Asmodai as I steal his sword, but we can still use that body for another conversion down the line. And in fact, in looking at it, he could be really good fodder for another Shield of Avalon later. So taking that sword and making some minor clipping and trimming so that I could fit it on, I think this pose has already changed massively just with swapping these two arms. It no longer looks like the Primaris Captain, but we still need to add a little bit more flair. And to do that, I'm going to be using parts from Bretonnian kits. The re-release of the Old World has actually been a boon for my Shields of Avalon, and grabbing one of the lance tips from the classic Bretonnian Knights is a really simple way to change up that Sanguinary Guard power lance. Another little flair to add with Lancelot is, as he was saved by the Lady of the Lake and taken to the Fey Realm to be raised, it makes sense that the Lady of the Lake is sort of his symbol. So I'm going to take this part from the new plastic Bretonnian Knights on foot kit that is used on a helmet, and it will go so perfectly on the back of his Primaris backpack. One more Bretonnian touch for this conversion will be to take one of those tilting shields that sits in the shoulder of the model. I'm going for an extra large one this time, as this will carry Lancelot's personal heraldry. Lancelot is one of the few Knights of the Round Table that has fairly concrete attributed arms. That means he actually has a set heraldry in Arthurian legend, whereas a lot of the other ones don't and offer a lot more freedom. Lancelot's is quite specific and doesn't match with his company color. So very specifically, I want to add this tilting shield here in the shoulder, so I've got somewhere to paint that on. With those elements complete, my conversion of Lancelot is finished, but I think he needs something else. As the captain of the second company, and probably one of the most important characters of the Round Table and most memorable knights, I want to build him up onto something distinct and memorable, a really cool display base with a few more accessories. And when I was looking into the lore of Lancelot from Le Morte d'Arthur and other attributed works, I saw that Lancelot effectively had two half-brothers, orphan siblings Lionel and Bors the Younger, who were raised with Lancelot, and he taught the ways of knighthood. So I thought, why don't I make some Space Marine aspirants? But aspirants are something that models don't exist for, and I mean, no one makes models of that scale and age, basically. So if I want to make a sci-fi squire that's also Arthurian, I'm gonna need to use Hero Forge. That's right, when we want to make cool custom custom models that there's just no options for, Hero Forge is our first port of call, and they are having a special sale all month long for their 10th anniversary. Hero Forge is an amazing online platform where you can design and create your own perfect custom model from thousands of parts available on their website. For pro subscribers, their digital kit bashing is exactly what I used today to create the two squires, Bors the Younger and his brother Lionel. We are in love with kit bashing and the options it gives you, but there's more to love this month, with up to 50% off digital STL miniatures. Not only that, there is up to 20% off all of their other physical miniatures. When you've designed your miniature, you can get them sent to you in various ways, including their premium color plastic, where you can use the painting tools on the Hero Forge website to fully color your model and then have it delivered to you as you colored it. There's also plastic standees, premium plastic and basic plastic, as well as other options to choose from. There is so much to love about Hero Forge, and there is more stuff being added constantly. So don't forget to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Hero Forge and of making amazing custom miniatures by taking advantage of their awesome and getting up to 20% off physical miniatures and up to 50% off digital STLs. All right, now that I've designed these models, I'm gonna go print them, and we're gonna talk a little bit about these squires and check out how they turned out in person. So I've just printed the two squires, and I'm really excited because Murray's finished his video, which means finally we can work on projects together.
We can pretend we're, you know, not separated by thousands of miles or something.
Even though we're working at the same desks next to each other.
Within slapping distance.
So Murray is going to be painting up the squires while I finish painting up Lancelot. Now, in the Arthurian legends, Lancelot was taken by the Lady of the Lake when he was orphaned to grow up in the Fey realm. Two brothers, Bors the Younger and Lionel, were actually taken by the Lady of the Lake and raised as well. These are medieval stories. There's a lot of sources and a lot of revisions, but from what I could find, it seemed that Lancelot was basically like an older brother figure to these two and ended up training them in what it meant to be a noble knight while in the Feywilds. So I thought, what a perfect way to represent that tradition than to create the squires, Bors and Lionel, for our Space Marine, because we never see this. Space Marine aspirants is such a big part of Warhammer lore. We have these, you know, Space Marines start their surgeries and implantations at about 10 years old before they become a Space Marine over 6 years. And it's just basically never in books.
Very rarely in books.
Super rarely, right? This is inspired by the Horus Heresy books based on Caliban, where you hear about Nemiel and his brother as they grow up on Caliban doing like hunts of monsters, and that's part of their initiation and training. I figured the Shields of Avalon could have something similar, even though they're Ultramarine successors. And here you go. Let's keep going.
Hell yeah. I'm really looking forward to painting these.
Dave has put me in charge of painting his two little squires, and I want to make them as unique as possible. So I'm going to do the inverse as for all the Marines. The Marines are all in their sort of resplendent silver armor with the trimmings of color all around them, or that sort of knightly heraldry. So I want to invert that. I want the squires to be very colorful. All their sort of space jumpsuits and whatever are going to be all the very lurid colors of their household, and then they'll have the small articles of armor as their sort of secondary colorings. And the colors in particular are going to be yellow and blue. So I'm going to do that thing where you divide up their outfit into halves, probably inverse the arms as well, just to give it a bit of that sort of checkered pattern, and then paint any additional cloth or the banner white, which then I think will be marked with the red striped heraldry of Lancelot, but I'm going to leave that last part for Dave at the end. Now, I want to get as much color saturation out of the yellow and blue as possible, so I'm going to do the sort of traditional layering system when painting those, just to really get the effect that I want, which with how detailed these little Hero Forge models actually are, will go really well with a good wash on them. Then I'll be left with all the little details, the non-metallic metal. We're going to have the sort of eagle at the top of the banner. I'll do that in gold. That's going to look really nice. And then the last part will be doing the faces, which I'm going to make them look fairly young, not too haggard in the 40k universe, but I still want just a little bit of weathering on them.
Okay, it's finally time to start painting my model, and when I paint my Shields of Avalon, I always start with a Chaos Black undercoat. So if you're painting along at home, Chaos Black is the way to go, except no substitutes.
Let's do it.
All right, while I wait for this undercoat to cure so I can keep painting, I'm gonna answer one of the questions a bunch of you have asked me about my Shields of Avalon. For those who don't know, my Shields of Avalon are a successor chapter to the Ultramarines. And if you're not super familiar with Warhammer 40k, don't worry, I'll be brief. Successor chapters are what happens when a major chapter of Space Marines gets too big and basically has to partition down and split off and create little groups. Now, a lot of people have asked me why I don't use like Dark Angels, which have a much more visually knightly vibe, and instead go for the by-the-book Ultramarines, which have a clear Roman aesthetic, as my successor chapter, because I find it way more interesting. I think looking at chapters as just their visual description is a very surface level reading, and most of the interesting Space Marine lore for successors comes from that intersection of their culture of the homeworld and the gene-seeded tenets of their parent chapter. I didn't want to make a carbon copy of something like the Dark Angels and just have Dark Angels that look like Dark Angels and act like Dark Angels. I wanted to create my own thing. So the idea with the Shields of Avalon is there's this night world that has lived in the 500 worlds of Ultramar since the Horus Heresy. And finally, at the creation of the Shields of Avalon, they have been designated as the primary recruiting world for a Space Marine chapter, this new successor chapter. So we have this beautiful comparison between a culture that has served in the 500 worlds for centuries, but still has that feudal old night world way of living mixed with the by-the-book template of the Ultramarines. Where do they make compromises? Where does one clash with the other and force kind of decisions and behaviors that are unexpected? These are the sorts of things I find more interesting and how you can make your Space Marine lore a little bit richer. You know, just because it looks like an Ultramarine doesn't mean it has to act like one, and just because it acts like one doesn't mean it is one. So yeah, that's the answer. Oh, also the Ultramarines are typically kind of more good guys. I mean, no one's the good guy in 40k, but they like treat civilians decently for Space Marines, and they try and protect regular baseline humans. And that fits with the knightly stuff actually a lot more than the Dark Angels, who happily sacrifice entire worlds to pursue their agendas, which just because they look like knights doesn't mean they act like knights. Yeah.
So I need to start making a base for Lancelot and his squires, and we're going to do this a little bit differently than normal. So I'm going to put Lancelot on his 40 mil base and make this look all pretty and nice, kind of what like Dave's done previously with the flowers and the grass. But then we're going to slot that on to a bigger base, more of a scenic style, and put the little squires on the back and try and make it look really cool and like a piece of art. This way Lancelot remains as a playable character, but he's got a really cool scenic base to stay on for display. So when it came to making the base for Lancelot and his squires, there was a couple of things to consider. First of all, I wanted to raise the squires up because they're smaller than Lancelot. He has this massive spear that will kind of tower above them if I were to put them on the same level, so I just wanted to give him a little bit of elevation. This meant building up the bigger base using cork and a little bit of spackle. When it came to painting, I tried my best to keep in the same theme as Dave's previous models, opting for a landscape that you wouldn't necessarily see in Warhammer 40k. We're going for more fairy tale, storybook, rolling hills, greens, flowers, that sort of thing here. So I tried to keep it as earthy and natural as possible, building up layers with dry brushing to really give that natural effect. So this is what I have so far. Lancelot's base comes out pretty nicely from the big one, and I have a little bit of filling to do at the front here, but I just wanted to make sure that this worked nice and snug. So I'm really happy with that, but I can't actually continue until the boys are done with their models, so I can put this on and then we can flock it and add all of those beautiful flowers, which will really create that beautiful storytelling feel. So I'm gonna leave that for now, and we're gonna jump over to Dave and see what he's up to.
In this video, I'm fixing Warhammer. Those sculpts you think you like, you're wrong. You shouldn't like them. I'm fixing them and making them better. Okay, actually, I am fixing Warhammer in this video. We had like a freak storm come through here, and it gusted through, blew the door open, and knocked my Shields of Avalon off the shelf. And one of the reasons I've taken so long to revisit this project is they are completely destroyed. But it's time to pick up the pieces, literally, and put back together my models. It sucks. Okay, so that was pretty damn cathartic. I have to say, it's been really demoralizing having those broken for a long time, and I'm sure it happens to a lot of you. The worst happens, your army breaks, and it just kind of kills your momentum. In fact, the same thing happened to me with my Alpha Legion. I had painted up my Exodus, probably the best model I'd ever painted for that army and that paint scheme. Really excited for it. I played my first game with it, dropped it, and he broke into like 15 pieces. Not kidding, like every seam, every piece broke that could possibly break. Every time models break, it damages the paint job, and it just kills quelled my enthusiasm to even do the army that I was really excited for. So it is good to get them back together. There is some battle damage, whatever, who cares? It's time for the Shields of Avalon to see the light of day again. And I'm gonna be taking them home and not leaving them in the dangerous wind tunnel corridor. They can sit on my shelf where there's no tornado winds. So it's been a while since my last Shield of Avalon video, 9 months in fact, and as I touched on, partially because my army got wrecked. Army? It's not an army. What is the Shields of Avalon as a project? Well, this is never going to be something that becomes a chapter. The Shields of Avalon is almost a modeling challenge, a little bit of fun, and a framework for me to use my favorite cool Space Marine sculpts as they get released without having to commit to painting a whole army. I also think it's a very solid foundation for the theming of a chapter of Space Marines, and it's one I've had a lot of fun with and will continue to return to as new models are released and I can come up with new interesting ways to convert the various Knights of the Round Table. Now, as we think about painting these models, you might notice that a lot of my guys have different colors. Well, the way it works in the Shields of Avalon paint scheme, everything has a standard gray, and this is to evoke the classical silver armor. However, it's of course ceramite, so it's just matte gray, but that's your base color here. Everything else is heraldry. And King Arthur, his primary color is yellow, and that pushes through the entire chapter, making yellow the secondary color of the Shields of Avalon. But each company has a third color. Most of the Knights of the Round Table seem to lean into your traditional 3, green, red, and blue, and there's 10 companies in a Space Marine chapter. So as best I can, I try and pair a company to one of the major knights. So far we've seen Gawain, who leads the 5th company, and his color is red. King Arthur's company, his tertiary color is white. Now Lancelot, as a historical figure, actually has attributed arms, and what attributed arms mean is basically where the Crown of England gave fictional heraldry to characters of particular importance, and Lancelot's is 3 diagonal red strokes across a white background. Now, with red and white already being taken, of course, Lancelot's company colors, well, I've got nothing to choose from. So what I'm doing is I'm going with blue because this is an Ultramarine successor chapter, and following that pattern, the first company in the Ultramarines has white trim. Well, that fits. King Arthur's white, which means that blue, reflecting the Ultramarines, fits very well for the second company. The second thing in importance besides the white of veterancy being an homage to the parent chapter, the Ultramarines. By creating company colors in this way, it's also really fun because every model I paint is just a little bit different, and I can play with colors, play with heraldry, and change things up. And with white, blue, and red taken, as well as yellow being a primary color, that means I can start to move into some weirder colors in the future. I definitely want to do something with the Green Knight and the color green, but there's also, of course, some more interesting colors: magenta, purple, cyan, and black for another character I do want to play with, a Mordred, perhaps a foil, the company that trains against everyone else in all their training battles and things like that. There's a lot of room to play with these legends and with the paint schemes, but today we have blue as the tertiary color, and that has informed all my decisions while I've been painting Lancelot. The gray is just dry brushing on black, Vallejo's heavy charcoal with a dry brush of Skavenblight Dinge and Storm Vermin Fur, increasing towards the Zenithal. And each of the primary colors, we've just used high saturation paints and blended in a 1, 2, 3 process, putting on a base coat, blending in a mid-tone, and then blending up to a highlight. By using high saturation paints, it means all of the colors feel really poppy, and that helps to evoke that classical knightly and fantasy feel. Now, while most of my knights in my faction, the whites, are all using warm tones, for Lancelot, I've actually chosen to use cool tones, building up from colder grays, and this is to tie in really nicely with his blue secondary color. There's a lot of gold and warm tones in these models already, so I think this is a nice contrast for Lancelot and his company. But that's enough out of me. I'm really excited to see what Murray's done with these 2 squires, and also to see what Jen has done making this base for me. So it's time to combine the elements before we can check out Lancelot and his squires. And as we enjoy these rotating shots of Lancelot and his squires, I'd like to give a special thank you to all of the patrons who support the channel. If you'd like to get weekly behind the scenes, access to our monthly mini review, or check out our extended episodes, such as the extended interview for the Trench Crusade one we put up recently, please consider joining our Patreon. Your support really is what allows us to keep making these kinds of videos for you every week. And without you, we would not be able to do this. So go check out the links in the description. It's done. That was awesome. I absolutely loved that project. It was so cool to get to revisit the Shields of Avalon and actually do it with Murray and Jen helping as well. So thank you to the whole team who aren't actually here today as I wrap up the video. If you enjoyed it, go check out the other Shields of Avalon videos in the series. And if you're liking this, I think the spark is back. So I'd be willing to go back and make maybe another character. I'm not quite ready for King Arthur yet. That project's too big. A space marine beheading a dragon in a single diorama. Yeah, not ready for that. But there are many more characters. The Green Knight on a bike is a great example, and I'd love to explore them. Or perhaps the Lady of the Lake. Yeah, she's a night pilot. All right, we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and thanks again to Hero Forge for sponsoring the video. Go check out their sale in the description. Bye.